George Maringa, KTN News.
Now, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees has called on donor communities not to give up on the Dadaab refugee camp as the resettlement of refugees continues in the world's largest refugee camp. Now, Caroline B. is just back from Dadaab, where she was tracking the process of refugee repatriation as the refugee agency called for Kenya not to forget the interest of the host communities in matters development.
It's a hot day at the world's largest refugee camp. 20 families sit in an erected shade at the Refugee Repatriation Center to cool off. They are 90 in number, all ready to leave for Somalia, following announcement of the closure of the Dadaab refugee camp. Nasibo Abdurrahman came into the camp in 2010 with one child following drought in her motherland, Somalia. 7 years later, she has 6 more children. Nasibo's children play around the shelter, some gazing at the visiting journalists who have become part of their lives. His eldest son, Mohammed, holds her youngest sister, who's now asleep.
Hakuna shida nyingi amekutana. Kenya ilikaribisha vizuri na ako very comfortable to go back to her country.
Together with her husband, Nasiba will join over 34,000 refugees who have already left for Somalia. She says coming to Kenya exposed her children to free education, and her priority once she gets home is to educate them.
Anakuambia amekuja hapa hajakutana na shida nyingi, sasa ameona arudi Somalia, atafuta kazi huko, ajenge nchi Somalia, ingawa sasa kuna amani na nchi inaendelea mzuri.
The United Nations refugee chief Filippo Grandi visited the camp after a tour to Somalia and Djibouti to follow up on the refugee situation in the Horn of Africa. He admits the situation in Somalia is volatile and the repatriation process is voluntary, even though donor funding to maintain those who left behind has drastically reduced.
We cannot expect everybody to go back. It will be gradual. And people have to make decisions based on their knowledge of security, of the available structures and so forth.
The process of repatriation is a fast one. Once at the center, the repatriation officer confirms if all family members are present based on a previous head count done at the refugee camps. The refugee then gets their fingerprint recorded and their documents stamped. Each family receives a stipend to help them settle down once in Somalia. Of the 75,000 refugees repatriated since 2014, 400 have come back after finding the situation in Somalia unfavorable. At the Hagadera refugee camp sits 45-year-old Ahmed Ibrahim. He has caught wind of the situation back home from some Britannies and isn't planning to go back home.
He says he had a number of children who are schooling, and so he felt that they are in a better place of learning than going back to Somalia.
Together with his family, they were relocated here from the Cambios refugee camp, which was fully shut down. Cambios is one of the 4 camps which make up the larger Dadaab camp. Ibrahim was a pastoralist and moved to Kenya in 1991 after being displaced by war. For him, Dadaab has been more than a home.
He said when he was in Somalia, he was a pastoralist. There was a serious drought. He lost all his herds, and there was nothing. His children fell sick. There were no hospitals. There was nothing. And so as a result of that, he decided to seek refuge here. And he said when he came here, he was well received. He was relocated, given a shelter. The host community were very friendly. And he said as a result of that, he enrolled his children into school. They started learning process, and he said he's comfortable enough now.
The Kenyan government announced its intention to close the 26-year-old refugee camp, saying it was a breeding ground for Al-Shabaab and other militia. In his address, Filippo Grandi said the interest of local communities in areas hosting refugees should not be overlooked.
We agreed also that there should be much more development, long-term assistance to somehow rehabilitate this region that has been affected for so long by the presence of refugees. I'm talking about the environment, I'm talking about roads.
Currently, the repatriation process has slowed down due to hostile weather conditions, and refugees return home by plane. Once the Horn of Africa stabilizes, UNHCR plans to reintroduce convoys. The returnees are resettled in Kismayo, Baidoa, Luke, Afma.